What is going on, football fans? Today I wanted to talk about a list that came out on NBC Sports, a rankings list of the top 40 quarterbacks in the NFL that was constructed by a former New York Giants son, Chris Sims. Of course, Phil Sims, his father, is the second greatest quarterback in New York Giants history and an all-time great Giant. Obviously one of the driving forces behind the '86 Super Bowl and our great start to that '90 season, where obviously Hostetler quarterbacked the team to our second crown. But Phil Sims was a great Giant. Chris Sims, a former NFL quarterback, now a failed ESPN analyst who now is working for NBC Sports, who came out with his list of the top 40 quarterbacks in the list in the NFL. And on this list so far, at least from what I have seen, and maybe more has come out, I just didn't bother to read the rest of his list after I saw this. I saw his 33rd to 40th best ranked quarterbacks in the league. He had Eli Manning ranked 34th. So if you're good at math, what that means is he thinks there are two better backup quarterbacks in the league, including Ryan Tannehill, who he had at 33. I didn't see the rest of his list. Now, before I get started, I do not want to say that I'm an Eli Manning apologist. I recognize that Eli Manning is at the end of his career. This will probably be his last season, at least as a New York Giant. We'll see if he moves on somewhere else after that. He is approaching 40, and there is a reason why we drafted Daniel Jones. Okay? We recognize as Giants fans, as an organization, that we needed to find the guy that is going to replace Eli Manning sooner than later. He's not what he once was. He does not have the same arm strength. But to say that he is the 34th best quarterback is just ridiculous and false. And it comes across that you're just trying to capture headlines and have that shock factor. Because this is just another perfect example of a New York athlete getting crushed by the media unjustly. It's ridiculous that he would even be ranked this low. Just Eli Manning's mind alone, he should be nowhere near 34. Now, if you want to say 20, 21, 22, when you look at it, I mean, let's be fair. The guy's won 8 games in his last 2 years. He's been to the playoffs once out of the last 6 years. So I get it. I get why people are down on Eli Manning. I get why he needed to be replaced. But by no means is that all his fault. I know the quarterback always takes all the blame, and to be fair, the quarterback gets all the credit. In 2007, as great as Eli Manning played down that stretch, obviously being a big force of our 2008 Super Bowl crown, he was carried for the most part, especially in the regular season, with that great pass rush we had and that strong offensive line and running game, of course, with Brandon Jacobs and Ahmad Bradshaw alike. So I get it, right? Eli Manning got a lot of credit. Maybe sometimes when he didn't deserve it. But over the last half of his career, he's gotten knocked a lot, sometimes unjustly, and a lot of times unjustly. And a lot of his failures have to do with Jerry Reese. It's plain and simple. He had his best year of his career in 2011, helping us win that 2012 Super Bowl. That year, no doubt, was a top 5 quarterback in the league. And then he just kind of fell off. It doesn't just happen like that when you're in your low to mid 30s, okay? Jerry Reese failed him, okay, with the offensive line and everything else. And last year was no different. The offensive line was somewhat improved the second half of the year. They still ranked 21st per PFF. Eli Manning was still sacked 7.5% of his dropbacks, meaning almost 8 out of every 100 pass attempts he was sacked. I'm not talking about hit. I'm not talking about having his passes deflected. I'm not talking about being rushed. I'm talking about just being sacked 8 out of every 100 pass attempts. Okay, so most quarterbacks in that situation will not succeed. And then I hear what a lot of people say, we need a mobile quarterback, which is nice. But there's tons of immobile quarterbacks who are successful still in today's NFL. The best quarterback in the sport has 2 left foots. His name is Tom Brady. Okay, Drew Brees is not the most fleet of foot either. So Peyton Manning was not fleet of foot. And you go down the list. Brett Favre, tons of quarterbacks. Now I recognize it's nice to have a guy that can run a little bit, and Daniel Jones represents that. But all you got to do is go back and look at last year's numbers, and he belongs nowhere near 34th. Does he belong around average, maybe just slightly below average? Yes, in my opinion. I'd probably have him around 20. I didn't make a list myself. But look at the numbers. Matthew Stafford, who I'm sure will be much higher in this list, he'll probably be like 15, had literally identical numbers to Eli Manning, only he threw for 500 less yards. Now, I didn't look that in-depth at his numbers. I don't know if he played less games, maybe missed a game or two due to injuries, but he threw for 3,800 yards. Eli threw for 4,300. They both had the same amount of touchdowns with 21 and the same amount of picks with 11. Eli Manning had a better QB rating at 92.4. Stafford was at 89.9. Stafford plays half of his home games in a dome. Okay? And there's tons of quarterbacks you could look at. That was just the one guy because their stats were so similar. Last year, Eli Manning, now I recognize a lot of this had to do with the dump-offs to Saquon Barkley. He threw a lot of shorter passes, and he was criticized for not taking more shots down the field. But you can't win when you're Eli Manning because when he takes the shots down the field and throws more picks, people get on him for that. But in terms of efficiency, he had his highest completion percentage of his entire career last year. Now, I'm not saying he's an above-average quarterback. He's not. Some of those stats were padded, specifically that Cowboy game earlier in the season. I remember he played awful in that game, and he ended up having pretty solid numbers at the end of that game due to a late touchdown. But you could say that for most quarterbacks. A lot of quarterbacks pad their stats. But yeah, he had his highest career completion percentage. He had his lowest career interception percentage. He only threw an interception on 1.9% of his passes. And he averaged 7.5 yards an attempt, which I believe ranked 15th in the league, and I think was amongst the highest of his career. So, and he also threw for 4,300 yards. And in the second half of the season, when the offensive line got better and Saquon Barkley got going, Eli Manning's stats were even better. He only threw 4 picks the last 8 games last year, proving he could be an efficient quarterback with the right support system. So to say that this guy is 34th is just ridiculous. And, quite frankly, Chris Sims looks like an idiot. He should talk to his father. Probably knows a lot more about football than him. That's all I had to say. I wanted to back up my guy Eli Manning. And I hope this year Eli Manning proves the doubters wrong. And by that, I don't expect him to go out there and throw for 5,000 yards and 35 touchdowns or 40 touchdowns, and lead us to a Super Bowl. But I do think he still has some good football left in him. And if the New York Giants offensive line, which is being advertised as vastly improved, can play up to snuff, I think Eli Manning could have an efficient, good year and could win some games for this team. Now, if he doesn't win games, I want to see Daniel Jones just as much as anybody. I recognize he's the future, just like Eli Manning was the future when Kurt Warner was our quarterback back in 2004. But I hope Eli Manning goes out there and we have a fairy tale run. He leads us to the playoffs, and Daniel Jones has some time to learn underneath him. And he proves a lot of people wrong this year because, the hate that he gets, and he's gotten it his whole career. He gets it from Giant fans, and I'm sure I'm going to get comments in this video, oh, Eli Manning should be 50th. Oh, he's the worst. He gets it from Giant fans, he gets it from Eagle fans, he gets it from Redskin fans. Some of it has to do with his all shucks attitude. Some of it has to do with the fact that his last name's a Manning. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that he plays in New York. I hope he goes out there and proves everybody wrong this year. I really do. And I think he could. We're just going to have to wait and see. Everybody's going to say that he lost Beckham and Beckham carried him. I don't agree with that. Go back and look at his numbers last year when Beckham wasn't in the lineup. Eli Manning performed just fine against some pretty good defenses. The Colts were one of the best teams in football at that point. So we'll see what happens this year. But I just want to get a quick video up on the page as my mouth dropped when I saw that ranking sheet, that he was ranked 34th in the NFL, coming off what was a pretty solid year for Eli Manning. He had very little to do with a lot of the losses that we had. It had a lot more to do with the fact that we couldn't get any ground game going because of our poor offensive line in the first half, and our defense was atrocious. I think we were 30th in the league in sacks. We couldn't get off the field. So that's my take. I hope Eli Manning goes out there and has a good year this year, and I think he still can. We're just going to have to wait and see as training camp is fast approaching. As always, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.